And let's see. Okay. So again, welcome. Thanks for being on. We all know that the early childhood workforce has been quite a hot topic in early childhood education, I think for as long as it's existed, but specifically through the pandemic. We know that the early childhood workforce has been absolutely devastated with staffing shortages. We know we've talked a lot about the difficulty paying wages to educators, the inability to provide benefits to educators. So I think what the pandemic has done is brought to light is how important this sector of workers are. And we're hearing a lot in press, we're hearing a lot in policymaking about how we need to find initiatives to help build this workforce up. So our hope tonight is to give you some overviews of things that are happening within the state and within the federal government, as well as give you all an opportunity to ask questions, make comments, and clarify any things that you maybe have been hearing out and about. So we have some folks who will be speaking on some different initiatives going on tonight. I invite you to ask questions at any time. You can use the chat, you can raise your virtual hand. Morgan is going to be putting some links in the chat as we go along if you want to look at those links for further information. If anybody wants to reach out to me personally, if you have private questions you want to ask, don't hesitate to do that as well, and I'll make sure I throw my email in the chat. So for folks who've just joined us, again, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and say hello to everyone. So the first thing we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to get a little bit into some potential benefits down the pipeline. And the first benefit we want to talk about that could potentially really help the early childhood workforce is the paid family and medical leave commission that's happening currently in the state to look at paid family and medical leave benefits for the workforce in Maine. So I want to introduce Dusty. And actually, Dusty, I'll let you introduce yourself if you want to come off mute. And if you could share a little bit about what's happening in Maine around paid family and medical leave.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thanks, Heather, and good evening, everyone. I'm really glad to be here with you all tonight. My name is Dusty Holman-Sprague. I'm the director of the Maine Women's Lobby, and the Maine Women's Lobby advocates for gender equitable public policy and legislation, and we have since 1978. And we work really closely with the folks at AEYC, so closely that we share an office. So I'm thrilled to be here with you all and to answer any questions that you might have. So just a little overview about the work for paid family and medical leave. I expect that you all already have a sense of what paid family and medical leave is, but sometimes when I think people know, I discover that like ideas about what that is are all over the place. So paid family and medical leave is paid leave for people to exit the workplace for a longer period of time. So not like 4 or 5 days, but more like 6, 8, 12 weeks, sometimes as long as 16 weeks, in order to have a baby or placement of a new child, to care for a sick family member, maybe to care for a dying parent, or an aging parent, or to care for their own selves after surgery or after serious illness. The United States is one of only 2 developed countries in the world that does not have some system of paid family leave or paid family and medical leave. So we know that it really matters. We know that about a quarter of women go back to work within 10 days of giving birth because they have to choose between a paycheck and staying home to bond with their baby. And I expect that you all working closely with infants and young children really see the effects on families when they have to make those tough choices. So last session, we lead the Paid Family and Medical Leave Coalition. It's about 26 organizations that range from AEYC to Equality Maine to AARP in support of this issue. Thanks, Morgan. And last year we were successful in passing a bill to create a statewide commission to look at the issue and to propose a plan for how we could make it work for Maine. That commission has been working since October. They have had 4 or 5 different meetings. They have taken public comment. They have had a number of speakers from other states and in our state. We at the Paid Leave Coalition presented some of our goal policy pieces, and they're coming back next week for, I think, their last one of their last meetings. But their job is really to identify what are the different pieces that would make this work. Paid leave is a pretty complicated policy. There are questions to answer around the number of weeks, what purposes people could take it for, what counts as family, how much payment people would get, sort of like unemployment insurance. You know, you don't necessarily get 100% of your pay, you get a portion of it. So how would we manage that? Where would it be placed in the state system? And how would we pay for it? Most states pay for it with a contribution out of payroll through either employees or employers or a mix of both. Most states are a mix of both. And that payroll contribution is usually about 40 cents per $100. So it's not a lot of contribution, but it can make a really big difference if it means that people can stay home with their babies or with their aging relatives. So the commission is scheduled to report back their overall plan on February 1st to the full legislature. I don't know that they will actually be able to report back on February 1st. I think that's a very ambitious timeline, but we do know that sometime in the next 4 to 8 weeks, they'll report out a bill, and then the legislature will take it up. So we'll know a lot more shortly. And I hope that folks here would agree how important this is for our families and communities and would be interested in being able to support the work. So if you have a story about how you needed paid leave and didn't have it, or how having paid leave really made a difference for you, those are the kinds of things that would be really helpful for us as we're moving the work forward once we do have a bill. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Dusty. And does anyone have any questions? Katie?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how many other states have a paid leave, program or policy already in place? Like, how does Maine compare to other states in that way?
Yeah, 10 other states and the District of Columbia have systems for paid leave. And they range from, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Colorado, Oregon, as I said, DC, California, Washington State. And they all look, there are always those same sets of questions to answer, but the different states look fairly different. What we're actually finding is that the newer a program is, like the more recently they implemented it, the more likely they are to offer more generous benefits. And that's because at first people really worried that like this would cause a real hardship for employers or would be hard to administer, or, that you wouldn't be able to staff if people are out for a long period of time. I'm sure for small employers like yourselves, that is a serious issue. But what they found in most states that offer it, it's actually a real benefit to smaller employers because it allows their staff to be supported and compensated without the employer needing to take that burden on. It's basically an insurance pool. So it works in other states. It helps contribute to longevity for staffing, reduced turnover. And so newer states offer bigger programs, generally speaking.
Dusty, we have a question in the chat about how it works for self-employed.
Yeah.
So for example, a family childcare provider.
Sure. So that's actually one of the questions that the commission needs to answer. Some states don't cover self-employed folks. Many states do. At the coalition, we are very much hoping for a plan that would cover self-employed people because we know that self-employed people also need these benefits. They're particularly need these benefits, right? Because they're often not in, a place with a big enough infrastructure to support them without this kind of statewide system. So we hope that self-employed people would be covered. And at the coalition, we are also asking that employers with fewer than 10 employees be exempt from the an employer side contribution. So earlier I mentioned that like 40 cents on the $100. I think that is a small amount to pay for the benefit, but I also know that even small contributions can be really hard for small employers. So we hope that small employers are left out of that system and really just get to reap the benefits of it. Not left out of the system, left out of the contribution.
I am wondering how with childcare and staffing, how I have my employee leave for temporary, hire another employee, and how does that other employee get booted out when the other employee is ready to come back? Like, we're already in such a crunch right now that we can't even have parents volunteer unless they're fingerprinted. So if my staff member's in a car accident and can't work for, let's say, 6 weeks, would we be looking at temp agencies? Or are we taking the burden of more payroll? Because I don't have a spine to set that other employee off my payroll after my other employee comes back.
Thank you for that question. And I do think that is like, I really hear that. I think that's an important question to answer. I think it's, I'm really aware of the audience I'm speaking to and how hard it is for y'all to staff right now.
I mean, we're dealing with COVID and close contacts and quarantines, and I've got 2 staff out right now. We had our first positive in 2 years. The people aren't lining up to come work for me right now.
Yes. Yep. I hear that. And I, particularly, I think because I'm coming from the women's lobby, I think a lot about the impact on like really what is essentially women-centered businesses. I mean, we know that there are men who provide early childhood education, but not a lot of them. And so, I hear that. I don't have easy answers for that. I think that that's something that we need to continue to do work around and making sure that we do address this and have solutions. But I do think too that, you mentioned having 2 employees out, or in the event that there's a car accident, those kinds of things we know happen anyway. And that in many cases, then the burden of supporting those employees who are out, like supporting their paycheck, falls to the employer. With an insurance system like this, the state would pick up, that insurance pool would pick up that, that paycheck. So sometimes people are going to be out anyway, new babies or whatever. This is a way to reduce the burden of paying for that payroll. It doesn't solve the problem of the staffing crisis.
I think that's a great point to bring up, Dusty, that regardless, we're going to have that staffing crisis, whether we have paid family medical leave benefits or not. And Tara had put in the chat something that had entered in my head too, is that we have a whole systems problem in early childhood education. One, we don't have a shared services model in the state of Maine where we potentially could have, shared substitute pools. We also know that takes being able to pay substitutes or temporary employees good wages to want to make them to work, to allow them to work short times, or, and I think, Terry, you bring up, sometimes parents can be that great person, but how do we give them the segue into being able to get those fingerprints and be ready to jump in a substitute situation too. So we have to be better about our systems in our whole advocacy. So, because certainly paid family medical leave isn't the solve all for some of our problems, but it's a step to make small businesses more competitive with larger businesses, I think, when we're thinking about losing educators to Walmarts and Walgreens and, you know, some more chain businesses, because they can offer paid family medical leave. A pregnant mother can go to one of those businesses and know that they're going to have time off to be with their baby, because a bigger corporation can incur those costs. As small childcare businesses, it's hard to say, you know, to an employee who might become a mother or might have a child getting sick or might get sick themselves. Certainly, I was a childcare educator and I had to take unpaid leave because of a surgery that became more significant than I thought it was going to be. And that hurt so bad. And that was one of my questions in my head as an employee going, why am I working in childcare? I don't know if I can afford this. So hopefully a system like this coming in could make our small childcare businesses become more competitive without placing the financial burden on these businesses that we know don't have the margins to cover those benefits. So thank you so much, Desti. We appreciate that. Certainly anyone could reach out to me if you have further questions for Desti and I can help connect. This is ongoing work. And again, I would encourage anyone who has a story to share about maybe hardships around accessing paid family and medical benefits that you could share that with Desti. She put her email in there. Heidi, I did see your hand raised. Did you have a quick question before Desti?
Yeah, so well, I do, but if you showed me that, if somebody could show me where the chat box is, I could probably do it there.
It should be right
Sorry.
at the bottom. Sometimes if it doesn't come up, you have to click the 3 dots.
Okay, so I see it there, but what do I do? Just go right behind somebody else? No, oh, the 3 dots. Okay. Oh, got it. Got
and
it.
does the
Sorry
chat
about
pop up?
that.
Yeah, and then you can
Yep.
type in. And what I'll do is
Yep.
I'll kind of move on in content as you type
Yep.
that in, Heidi, so
Yep.
we can make sure we get to the other topics.
Yep.
So the next piece I just want to touch upon quickly, and I am certainly not an expert in this, and maybe there's others on the call who know more about this legislation than I do, but I've dived into it a little bit, and it's some pieces that another benefit piece that could potentially really support early childhood workforce and small businesses. Last legislative session, LD 1622, which for short was called the Work and Save Bill, was introduced and enacted by the Maine legislature. And what this does, it creates a Maine retirement savings program. Some of you may know that there's already a Maine state retirement system, but that's for state public employees. This is creating a Maine retirement savings program that is an investment of a public-private retirement system. What it will do, it's established a Maine State Retirement Board, and it allows employees working for businesses that do not offer retirement benefits to pay right from their paycheck into a Roth IRA. And as employers, what employers would do is just help facilitate that through their payroll going into that IRA. So the timeline that I know of that right now is that the Maine State Retirement Board has to be established by May 2022. So they're working on getting those seats appointed. But again, this is something that's enacted into law, and I'm happy to try to answer questions. And if I can't answer your question, I'd love to take that and I could speak to Senator Batelli, who was the sponsor of that legislation, to find out answers. But I think it's another way that small private businesses can begin to compete with the larger businesses, because retirement is also not a benefit we hear that is regularly offered in childcare. It's my understanding as well that self-employed folks can participate in that as well. So I will get the definite answer on that, but that was my taking from my research. So any questions or comments about retirement benefits?
Heather, I'll
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah.
As self-employed, we can open up our own through the IRS or through any financial thing. They're self ones. I'm all for anything that gets people putting in money for retirement. So I guess my question would be is this going to be simpler than that? Where is the control point as individuals? Where do you have control? Or is it set up like the Maine teachers retirement program?
So from what I read, Deb, my understanding is that the main benefit of this is to make it simpler for folks to invest in retirements. One statistic I read is that typically in Maine, folks who just rely on Social Security, the average payment right now is around $16,000 a year. However, the average cost of living is around $19,000 a year. So you're already short if you're just focusing on Social Security. So what I have read and researched in this bill is that retirement savings can baffle a lot of people. It can be hard to navigate and understand, what do I invest in? What does this mean? What this would do is create a simpler system where folks just automatically can have a certain percent of their money taken out. They can pause it, they can cancel at any time. So they really have control over it too. So it's really to incentivize more people to invest in their own retirement, which in the end for Maine to put the money in up front like this to help support a system like this could actually end up saving money on the end, in Social Security payments as well. So, again, I'm not as well versed into it, but that is what I've read. And as I learn more, I'll definitely make sure we get that information out. But it did seem like from a lot of the testimonies I read and a lot of explanations I've read that the idea is to make it simpler for employees and the other thing is too, is that the employer does not contribute into it. So if you are an owner of a childcare program and you have employees who want to participate in this, all you're doing is facilitating that through payroll. You are not having to put any of your business money into it. So it's designed to help employees and be another benefit you can offer as an employer without hurting your margins and hurting your budget. All right, so we are going to move on to the next piece. So we're going to get into some things that are happening in the state now to support, specifically training and business practices. So I'm going to hand it over to Lori Moses, and Lori's going to talk a little bit about the new apprenticeship program at Maine Roads to Quality.
Thanks, Heather. Well, good evening. And the first thing is that it is a new position at Maine Roads. And so I'm new there in that role, but that just shows that the state is supporting apprenticeship. So that's the good news. I was looking at some of the comments that Tara had about shared services, and I know at least one person on this call. There was Maine Shared Services Alliance. A group met, it was sponsored out of KV Cap for several years, and we met in Cumberland County, Southern Maine, I guess. And because of this was pre-pandemic, looking at the staffing crisis, we just kept talking about staffing, and ended up creating an apprenticeship program. And then Maine Shared Services kind of went away, but that structure of an apprenticeship program is in with the Department of Labor. So what I've been doing is looking at that, looking at that model and looking at other states to see what works for Maine. And so I'll just talk a little bit about some of the components of an apprenticeship program. So, there's 5 core components. The first one is employer involvement. You have to be a sponsoring employer, and there's paperwork, it's the Department of Labor. And so there's a process, but it's not difficult. It's just, you have to know how to get through that process. But you really have to understand that it's an investment in your employee or future employee. So there's just lots to it. Then you need another component is structured on the job training. And so the model that we had done, and again, I don't know if this will be what ends up, is that we had it, the Department of Labor, it's 4,000 hours of work over 2 years and 144 hours of training each year. And so as part of that, it's structured on the job training so that besides any coursework, whether it's credentials or CDA or associate's degree or another degree, there needs to be a mentor or coach on site. And so there's also needs to be that person needs to be trained, and Maine Roads offers coaching and mentor training. And so that's a model that's not just Maine, it's all across the country for an apprenticeship. And then there's related training in classroom instruction. And so the end result of the model that we worked at was a CDA, a child development associate. Well, in some states, they start with a CDA and end with a bachelor's degree. So it's really what makes sense there. And what makes sense in Maine. And there's also, articulation agreements and scholarship. And the Department of Labor does offer $500 one-time support to the program. And then there's rewards for the skill gains. So again, it's competency based. So each step of the way, you have to have a very clear starting wage and then steps. A lot of programs have 4 steps, so that over those 4,000 hours, which is pretty much 2 years, that person starts at a particular wage and ends at a ending wage. And there's all kinds of incentive programs. And then the last component is an industry recognized credential or degree. And that's why some states look at the CDA as the end result of those 4,000 hours, and some do it differently. The other thing that, especially now, when we started looking at it through Maine Shared Services, like I said, it was pre-pandemic and we were already struggling. And so just looking at the opportunities that are available through the different collaborations, it's a really interesting potential. And there's all kinds of, what I was going to say is when we were looking at it, looking at youth apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship, because it's, we really want to start earlier, whether it's, through the CTE programs, or, I'd say middle school, but I don't think they'd be getting paid for it. But there's challenges because of the age, because they're obviously not 18. In our field, it's 18. But if there are ways that we can figure that out, to me, that was really probably one of the most interesting things to take advantage of, is potentially looking at youth, a pre-apprenticeship. So there's a lot that's going to happen, but right now we're in the beginning stages of really looking at what makes sense for Maine and what the need is, but there's those 5 components really are critical for any apprenticeship program.
Thank you so much, Lori. And I think I know I'm super excited to see this happening in Maine, and what a great leader we have you at the helm with all of this. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the apprenticeship program that will be starting? And if folks wanted more information, Lori, could they reach out to you? Okay.
Yeah, I have. Oh, sorry. I just have a quick question. It's Maggie. Hi, Lori. Good to see you.
Hi, Maggie.
So glad to see you.
I know.
I was curious, with an apprenticeship program, obviously speaking from the community college, can there be options? Like, can somebody in an apprentice position go for a CDA and somebody else go? Can the model be set up in sort of tracks?
I actually hadn't thought of it that way, because most states are very specific. But there really is an articulation agreement, so that some states will offer 7 to 9 credits for an associate's degree from the apprenticeship, and others will offer like 9 credits towards a bachelor's degree. So again, it's not a complete associate's degree, but it's interesting because I think there are different needs. In some sectors, maybe the CDA would work best, and in some, maybe an associate's or a bachelor's degree. So I've not seen where there's multiple end credentials. I've not seen that, but I'll put that on my radar, Maggie. And I mean, it's an interesting question.
Yes, I would just, can I ask maybe Morgan or Tara, how would it interface with the Teach Me program, or wouldn't it, or was one better than the other, or?
So in some states teach, in other states that have teach, they work with apprenticeship programs, like you mentioned, Heidi, and they kind of go hand in hand together. So like, for example, you have an employee on the Teach scholarship, they would also be in the apprenticeship program and have a mentor. In Maine, because they're from separate organizations, this won't be the case, but they could be on a Teach scholarship and in an apprenticeship program. That would be up to a center to decide to sponsor and invest in their employees in multiple ways.
Are they giving different benefits?
So you'd get all the same benefits as the Teach scholarship, and then whatever Maine Roads to Quality figures out with the apprenticeship in terms of like if mentors receive stipends, that's how some states do it. They would be completely separate.
Okay.
They would be separate, but they would work together. In some states they do work together. And there are things, for sometimes it's books, sometimes it's reimbursement for transportation, sometimes it's part of the wage for someone to work part, have part of the wage supported.
Yeah. I support anything that gets more training in there, recruiting training. I would like to have 25 spots at Heidi's house, and I have one.
We appreciate you, Heidi.
What'd you say?
I said, we appreciate you.
I need more, lots more.
I think
Goal to
Carrie
get
had a
there.
question too.
I do.
Yeah.
So is this in my community, our high school has a vocational center that does early childhood.
Mhm.
Is this something that we might be able to collaborate with and get students in the workforce through the apprenticeship program, make money, go to school, get training, kind of pull the community together in that way?
It would be, it's new for me to look at having the work with the CTE school students because they're under 18. So that, so to have them on staff, you can't do that with licensing.
We can, they just can't
Oh,
be
can we?
considered in ratio.
In
by
ratio.
themselves. So
Correct.
we would, and with an apprenticeship program, don't you have to have somebody above you? There would have to be somebody there with them anyway.
Oh, absolutely. You have to have someone, the coach has to be on site, at least in some of the models. The coach or mentor needs to be on site. And you could do it that way as long as they're not included in the ratio. You're right. They could,
Okay.
which is great. You've got.
Well, it's going to bring new and maybe bring the field up a little and.
Absolutely. And the advantage of having them start early is that you get them in there. They're getting paid while going to school. So they're thrilled. Then by the time they graduate, they'll have whatever certificate, whether it's the CDA, and they're already been trained in your program. So then they can start with the CDA and having been trained and paid along the way. It's the earn while you learn. So there's lots of different models, but it's all about who's going to pay for the training, who pays for the time, the mentors. As Morgan said, some states, they offer mentor stipends. It's a lot of work. You're meeting with that person weekly. Maine Roads to Quality would work with on-site consultation, that kind of thing to help, as well as the different coursework, depending upon what the end result of the model is. And like I said, the one we did from shared services was the end result was the CDA for one of them. There was a child development specialist 1, and then a child care development specialist 2, and the 2 was going on to their associate's degree. But I see.
I see Laura's hand up and then Katie's, and then we'll move on.
Hi, Lori.
Hi,
Just, and I
Laura.
think you kind of, hi, you just kind of touched a couple things. I think that was what I was asking is if at this point, does that model that we had been working on still include hopefully places where stipends would come from for those coaches, maybe even splitting and helping? I know we talked about paying half, like for a CDA scholarship for half or something like that to help the employers support the employees that were going through this, because there will be additional expenses as we take on and commit to these kind of programs or apprenticeship programs. We're going to have fees on our end that we're going to collect. So I'm assuming that you're probably looking into those and you're trying to get some of those in place.
I think the key is incentives. There's got to be, it's not, you and I both have gone through it and we know how time consuming it is. And so I'm really grateful to have that perspective. And, what's going to make, we know what's in it for the employee, but what's in it for the employer as well, because it's an investment in that employee, but it's a lot of time and it's a commitment. And so I've said this, and again, I'm still just dabbling and really have not talked about it as a whole and what I'm presenting, but every step of the way, it's incentives. What does the field need on both ends, from the employer to to the apprentice, and what are the incentives? There have to be incentives. That's been my mantra anytime anybody asks me about it.
Yeah. And in my experiences, I actually went through the apprenticeship program, Lori, you and I have talked about it in 2004. So I think someone had asked the question earlier. I actually was going for my degree, and I was actually doing the apprenticeship program at the same time. So I was using MRTQ scholarships for my classes, and I was using apprenticeship funds for my books, like you had mentioned. And a little gas, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was a little bit more money. Every semester they gave me a certain amount of money to spend as long as I was filling out my paperwork. And I think back then I was using the RDAs for my coach. So it was back then. So the model was there at one time, as we talked about. So it's now, how do we do it with a lot of those things having been dismantled? But I think back then it was the RDA that I used for my coach and my mentors for my CDA when I started. So thank you very much, Lori.
Sure.
Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize if you already said this. I was wondering how programs, like, how do you determine, how does a program get to host an apprentice?
And like you said, at this point, there isn't a way, because there isn't a way. There would be a way, as just you would apply to be a sponsor. And some of the things you'd have to, a lot of it's paperwork, commitment to be a mentor, have a mentor on site, commitment to the wage, stipend, the different steps, commitment to making sure that person has time off for training, things like that, there's definitely components, and there's a whole range of things that you would sign with the Department of Labor. And then the model that we had an MOA with Maine Roads, because they were helping walk the person through the training to get their CDA, and what the core knowledge training and some of the other training. So once it's set up as an established program, it wouldn't be through Maine Shared Services Alliance, because they don't exist. It would be through Maine Roads to Quality and Professional Development Network and the state, the Department of Labor. And it needs to be approved by DHHS. So there's another step in there. And so it's, we haven't even begun to present what it would look like to the state, but I think it would look very similar, because, as the shared services model. But again, there has to be incentives. It's great to have this training, and it's great to have a mentor and all that, but it's a lot of time, and it's a real commitment. And so, but once that, by the end of the year, not the end of this year, it should be all laid out. We'll really, once we get it presented to the state, and then we will, then it will be out there, and we'll market it, and people will know about it and be able to join. And really wanted to make sure, in some states, it's also, for family childcare, and some it's not. It's just centers. Some it's looking at just teachers and preschool credentials. So it's very different in different states, but what I'm looking at is to make sure that it's as broad and as inclusive as our childcare system, if that's possible, because we all, every sector has its different needs and structure.
And the Department of Labor is funding it?
Right now, there's money through the Maine Roads to Quality Professional Development Network as part of the Child Care Development Block Grant, I believe, that funds
Okay.
Maine Roads. The Department of Labor does have some funding, like I said, for some of the training, but they don't fund it per se. So that's where also looking at other partners. The most successful states that I've seen have had multiple partners. They've got the AEYCs, they've got R&R, they've got the Department of Education, they have the Department of Labor, they have business, and they have philanthropy. Those have been the most successful. So where they, someone will say, we'll pay for the stipends, or we'll pay for this. So I think the broader that we can develop the funding source for this, the more that we can offer incentives. Because I just think that I keep hearing, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? And obviously it's a trained staff person, but you have to pay them those four steps. So how can you do that? I mean, we'd all like to pay people more. So how do you do that in a short amount of time, in 2 years? Typically, it's a decent raise. It's a decent wage differentiation each step.
Well, we're going to get more public funding for wages, Lori, so we are going to be able to pay that. So that is the goal. Yes.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. And it's so exciting to see how this unfolds, and we can't wait to see the timeline progress and be able to give updates about it. So thanks for the work you're doing, Lori. I'm going to move on to Morgan for a Teach Scholarship update and opportunities available there for the workforce.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So hi, I'm Morgan Tolan. I'm the program coordinator at Maine AEYC of our Teach Scholarship program. For those who aren't familiar, Teach is a scholarship program that Maine AEYC hosts. So everything goes through us. It's funded through the Office of Child and Family Services. Excuse me. So what Teach is, it's a collaborative effort between childcare programs in Maine. So that includes larger centers, family childcare, and higher ed programs. And us, Maine AEYC. So what we do is we pay for it depends whether you're going for an associate or bachelor's degree, but we pay between 85 to 90% of tuition. So you basically leave your college with a degree and no debt. And what else we do, we pay for books. 80% of books we reimburse. There's a $250 stipend each semester that each recipient receives. And historically, the stipend was called a travel stipend, and it was for getting to class or paying for parking or stuff like that. We call it an access stipend now, and we have a recipient right now that's a single mother. She uses it to pay a babysitter to do her coursework or when she needs to go to classes. It's money you get to do whatever you need to or pay your portion of your tuition. There's paid release time each week. So sponsoring centers give their employee 2 hours a week and they're paid for that time. And in return, Maine AEYC reimburses them for half of those wages at the end of the semester. So you're paying them for that time, but then you're also being reimbursed for those payroll costs. You receive a bonus at the end of each Teach contract. So a Teach contract is a year, and at the end of that year, if you've completed 9 credits, you receive a $350 bonus from Maine AEYC, and then 6 months later, you get a $250 bonus from your employer. And then in return, that employee that's being sponsored on a Teach scholarship is committed to working for you for another year. So for example, I can give a real life example. Heidi's on here now from Heidi's House Childcare. She has an employee on a Teach scholarship and she's just starting her degree. So it might take her 3 years. And then after that 3 years, she's committed to working with Heidi for another year. So that's 4 years Heidi has this employee. that's pretty amazing right now in early childhood. I mean, I know we all have employees that have stayed with us for a long time, and that speaks volumes to leadership. But there are programs that have so much turnover. This could be a game changer. So what being a sponsored employer, so a sponsoring center, means is paying part of your employees' tuition, giving them paid release time, and the bonus. So in terms of investment financially for a center, it's fairly small. If your employee is getting an associate degree, 7.5% of that tuition is about $60 to $80 a semester. So your investment is small, and you're not only getting this employee staying with you for a year, this employee is going to school, gaining knowledge, taking courses, and in return, your program becomes higher quality. So happy to answer any questions. I see Tara put one in about family. Yeah, so family childcare. If you're a family childcare and you're the owner, you're not sponsoring an employee. We're just working directly with you as the owner. So for example, if you're getting, we have several family childcare on now, we pay 90% of their tuition if they're getting their bachelor's degree, and then they pay the 10% of their own tuition. And same with books. We reimburse 90% of their books and they pay 10%. So we are slightly changing our application process. Thank you, Heidi. That reminded me that in prior to now, you had to already be enrolled in a higher ed program to apply. And we've changed that now. You can apply now if you have an employee that's turning their wheels about going back to school, have them apply, and they can be conditionally accepted. And then I work with that employee to find the best educational pathway that works for them. So whether that's community college, or if they have some credits already, maybe it's going right to UMF if they have the right amount of credits, figuring out is online best, in person, what works best for that learner. And so we can go through that, and I can help with the application process. I've edited essays, resumes. I'm just here to help people get on the right pathway that works for them.
And I see Katie's hand up, but Katie, I don't know if that was from before or if you had a new question.
I see Michelle.
That was from before, sorry.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so Michelle had a question in the chat. Do you see that, Morgan?
Yes. So to be eligible, you need to earn less than $20 an hour, which is not an issue for most of us. You need to work 30 hours a week in the program, and you do need to have talked to your director, owner of the program you're working for, and work with them to know that they'll sponsor you. And it does need to be a Maine-based college, which on our website, you can find where those are. I'll put the link in the chat box for that. Any other questions? I'm going to put the link to our Teach website, or the Teach section of our website on here. And I'm also just going to put my my link to meet if you want to meet with me, if you have questions, you can click on that and schedule a call with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have employees that are interested. Sometimes just one-on-one is really best to answer those really specific questions.
Thank you so much, Morgan. So yes, please reach out to Morgan. And as you noted, Tara saw in the chat, we are trying to get more funding and grow this scholarship program, because we know it is becoming a demand, and folks really want to participate in that. So it's great that we're able to offer that and do that programming. So thanks for all your hard work, Morgan, with that work. We are going to move on to talk about the Child Care Workforce Bill that is sponsored by Speaker Fecto. I'm also going to place in the chat an opportunity through the CEI Business Lab for anyone who might live in some rural counties in northern Maine, or know someone who might be interested in starting a childcare business. It's a great opportunity to have some free business guidance and coaching through there. So Morgan just popped that in the chat. So please share that out. We love to get, more businesses started in Maine. We know there's a childcare need in Maine. So it's a great program for any folks that you might know in some of the northern and rim counties looking to do that. So I'm going to hand it over to Tara, and she's going to talk about the update on the early childhood workforce bill.
So many folks who are on here tonight or who may be watching the recording later have been part of advocating for and really supporting a bill that is, the number is LD 1652. I actually in my head just thought of the number from the previous session because it's now gone through more than one session, but the current one is 1652. It was carried over from last year. And for those who aren't familiar with it, just really quickly to know that the core of the funding in that bill is for supporting wages and salaries of the early ed workforce through a wage supplement model. The rest of the bill is focused on how we build career pathways, really focused on not only more funding for apprenticeships and scholarships and CTE programs, but also infrastructure in the state around how we collect data and have workforce studies and report backs from our departments and legislatures so that we're really looking at the system comprehensively and how all these components work together. That is really assessing what's working, what needs to scale up, what needs to be better coordinated so that we're supporting the workforce, supporting childcare programs, and growing a stronger childcare system. Now, one of the interesting things that came about after many of us, including me, were quite disappointed that we had to carry over the bill was that it actually gave an opportunity to look at how it was going to work to get American Rescue Plan, ARPA federal funds out the door through childcare stabilization grants. And those of you who work in programs will be well aware and are probably receiving monthly grants right now from the state. And as part of those stabilization grants, there's a part that's required to go to salaries as a bonus or supplement, $200 per staff member per month. And so our current conversations, and there's really good conversations going on right now between the Speaker's office, between the Governor's office, between the Right from the Start Coalition, Maine AYC, lots of folks that are all talking about this, about how to best move forward. And what they heard loud and clear from the field, what we've all heard, is that we need to keep something going similar to what was started this year. There needs to be ongoing support that comes monthly, not annually, not twice a year like wages are done in many other states. And so we're really committed to working on with the Governor's office and the Speaker's office in the next couple of weeks to tweak changes to the bill, look at ways to get funding out the door so that there is no stop. So it seamlessly starts up right when the ARPA is going to end so that we can continue wage support. Now, when I say there's no stop, I don't mean that there's going to be enough funding for the full childcare stabilization grants to continue. I just mean the part about salaries. And one of the things we talked with the Speaker's office about is looking at how to grow the funding so that not only can it continue, but there can be a tiered approach so that folks can be able to offer larger supplements to those who've worked in the field longer, who have more years of experience, or who have credentials or degrees that you want to value and honor. We also heard feedback from folks that there was no differentiating if you had a part-time versus full-time. So really just making sure it's more flexible and it allows for that. So we're gonna, some of this I can't update on because I don't yet know it all, but in the next couple of weeks, there should be more information when the governor's supplemental budget comes out, because it's likely that there will be funding in there for something for childcare or the workforce, and we're waiting to see what happens with that. So the main thing to know if you're focused on this bill is we're going to be in touch in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and there probably will be something that we will ask you to do, whether it's to help us write to the governor or OCFS, or to write to legislators with either a final push or just a big thank you. Because in the next few weeks, we're going to get to that point where we really know exactly how much funding is coming through, the status of the bill, because the bill already had a public hearing and a work session. So really, if there's any language changes, it needs to go back and have another work session. But if not, it would just need a vote. So I know that's kind of a lot of all over the place, because it might go this way or it might go that way, and we don't exactly know the money. But I wanted to make sure we just updated you all to know that things are happening with it. And as soon as we know more, we will make sure that the field and our network knows more, and that we can hopefully not too far in the future be celebrating a really great win for funding for the early childhood workforce in Maine that is not 1 year, but is ongoing. And I think we're very close to that. And we only have a couple minutes left. So I'm wondering if folks, if they have questions, want to put them in the chat, because I don't want to end tonight without you getting to hear quickly from Heather about Build Back Better, because that's also still a very strong potential for our future and really good funding coming through.
Wonderful. Yeah, so if you have questions, pop them in the chat and Tara can type back answers, or we can follow up later as well. So yeah, last couple minutes, I just want to update everyone on Build Back Better. We do have, we had a little depressing news right before Christmas. Wasn't the Christmas present I wanted under my tree. Senator Manchin had come out saying he would not support the Build Back Better Act. And for those of you who follow it, in the Senate, Build Back Better was looking like it was going to be a very partisan vote. Senator Manchin is a Democratic senator who has voiced that he would not vote for it at that time. However, conversations continue. So we are still feeling optimistic that some movement can be made. And I know the Biden administration is working very closely with Senator Manchin to hopefully come and go forward with this. So we are staying optimistic that this is not a dead bill. This is still very much has not been voted on and just as continues to be worked on. So what we would love to ask folks is to continue to reach out to Senator King and Senator Collins and voice support in favor of, because as we're talking about workforce initiatives, this would be the largest investment ever in our lifetime in the early childhood workforce. And what it would do, if you think about the supplements that are coming out now, it would blow that out of the water. It would bring folks up to livable wages. It would provide compensation on par with public school teachers for similar credentials, experience, and degrees. And it would come towards you and your programs. And the way that would happen is we would actually use a cost of care model and not a market rate. So what you charge families, does not cover what you want to pay your employees, what you want to pay yourself, what you have for overhead costs. It does the bare minimum just to keep most of your businesses afloat. This would take into account what you would need to do that and give that to you so that you are able to recruit and retain staff for their experience and credentials and degrees and training. You would be able to invest in the quality of your program. You wouldn't have to worry that you're one bill away from a heating system breaking or anything like that. So there's a lot of support in there for the workforce and for the program. So we will continue to, push and advocate hard as advocates for Maine OIC, but we definitely need all of your help. There's a few myths going on out there that I would like to address. One is that it does not include faith-based programs. It absolutely includes faith-based programs. It lists faith-based programs throughout the bill. So that is a myth that's going around. Just as faith-based programs have got the ARPA stabilization grants, they would receive these as well. The other myth that's going around is that it would cost families more. This would provide tuition assistance up to folks who make up to 250% of the state median income, and that is 90%, about 90% of Maine families would be covered by this, and that the government would be infusing funds to cover that cost of care model to go directly to programs. So no family making within that 250% of state median income would pay more than 7% of their income for childcare costs. That bill would now be picked up by the government. So it's a huge bill. It's something that we've been advocating for a long time for this amount of federal investments into our systems, and it would be huge relief for families, huge relief for childcare, and hopefully be able to, and definitely be able to help increase access to, because you'd have sustainable business models for childcare happening and incentivize more childcare businesses to open up. So Okay, it looks like we're a few minutes over. So if anyone has additional questions, I'm going to stop recording.